Today, you're going to train your ear with a story about discipline and reinvention, and learn phrases that will change how you speak and how you see your own life. Here's the deal. A lot of people say, I watch English content all the time and I'm still not improving. Sound familiar? That's because watching isn't enough. You need to listen with intention. And that's exactly what we're doing today. Before we go any further, here's your first win. One phrase from today's story, the kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. Say it once out loud. Right now, the kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. That's real American English, and you just said it. That's progress in under 60 seconds. By the end of this video, you'll have 3 powerful phrases locked in. Phrases you can actually use in conversation, in writing, in your own head. And here's what I want you to stay for, because we'll break down one sentence from this story that looks simple, but hides something most intermediate learners completely miss. You'll want to catch the stay with me. Okay, before the story starts, let me set you up for success. The story you're about to hear is called The Boy Who Woke Up at 5 a.m. for 21 days. It's about a guy named Daniel, 26 years old. Not in a crisis, but not really living either, just drifting. And over 21 days, one small decision changes everything. And now a few things to know before you listen. First, the level. This story is intermediate to. The vocabulary isn't technical, but the sentences are rich. They carry emotion. They have rhythm. That rhythm is the lesson. Second, what to listen for. Don't try to understand every single word. That's the wrong goal. Instead, notice how the sentences feel. When does the narrator slow down? When does the energy shift? That's where the meaning lives. Third, and this is important, just listen. No pausing. No rewinding. Let the English wash over you like music. Your brain is doing more work than you think, even when it doesn't feel like it. This story was chosen because it's the kind of English you hear in documentaries, podcasts, and real conversations. The kind that actually sticks. All right, get comfortable. Here comes the story.
He didn't set an alarm because he believed in early mornings. He set it because he had nothing left to believe in. It was 4:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in November. The city outside his window was still wrapped in darkness. The kind of darkness that doesn't feel empty, it feels patient, like the world is holding its breath, waiting to see what you'll do with the silence. Daniel sat on the edge of his bed, 26 years old, unshaven, the kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. His phone lit up with a reminder he had set 3 months ago, on the worst night of his life. It said, simply, "Wake up. You said you would." He stared at those words for a long time. Outside, a dog barked once. Somewhere, a truck rumbled past. And inside his chest, something that had been very, very still, shifted. He stood up. He didn't know it yet, but that movement, that small, almost invisible choice to stand, was the first domino in a chain that would dismantle and rebuild him completely. What happens when a person decides to wake up at 5 a.m. every single day for 21 days straight, not to become a productivity machine, not to post about it online, but because something in them desperately needs to change, and they don't know how else to begin? This is Daniel's story, and somewhere inside it, it might be yours too. 6 months before that Tuesday morning, Daniel's life looked fine from the outside. He had an apartment, a job in graphic design, nothing thrilling but stable. A small circle of friends he texted more than he saw. A gym membership he hadn't used since February. A half-finished painting on his desk that he kept meaning to return to. From the outside, ordinary, manageable, fine. But fine, Daniel had come to understand, can be one of the most painful words in the English language.
Because fine means nothing is catastrophically wrong. And when nothing is catastrophically wrong, you don't feel entitled to be struggling. You tell yourself you have no reason to feel this hollow. And so the hollowness grows quietly, invisibly, in the space between the life you're living and the life you sense you could be living, if only you knew how to get there. Daniel's days followed a pattern so precise, it had become a kind of cage. He woke up around 8:40, 9 minutes after his third snooze. He made coffee, he drank lukewarm while scrolling his phone in bed. He worked from home, which should have felt like freedom, but in practice meant his commute was 10 feet, and his longest conversation most days was a Slack message saying, "Sounds good." By evening, he was restless, but too tired to do anything about it. He'd watch something, eat something, sleep late, and repeat. He wasn't depressed exactly, but he wasn't present either. There is a term for what Daniel was experiencing, though he wouldn't have called it by any name at the time. He felt like a passenger in his own life, like the days were happening to him rather than because of him. He had a deep, unspoken belief that he had somehow missed the moment when he was supposed to become someone, that everyone else had received a set of instructions he never got. And the worst part? He had stopped asking why. He had accepted the drift as permanent. That is, until the night everything quietly broke.
It wasn't dramatic. That's the strange thing. There was no explosion, no single catastrophe, no cinematic moment of loss. It was a Thursday evening in late August. Daniel was at his friend Marcus's birthday dinner, a small gathering, 8 people, a restaurant with candles and good wine. At some point, someone asked everyone at the table, "What's the best thing that's happened to you this year?" The question went around the table like a slow-moving wave. Marcus talked about his promotion. His girlfriend talked about hiking the Pyrenees. Someone else mentioned a new apartment, a new relationship, a creative project that finally clicked. Daniel smiled through all of it. When the question reached him, he opened his mouth, and nothing came. Not because his year had been terrible, but because he genuinely could not name a single moment that had felt fully alive, a single morning he had stepped into with intention, a single choice he had made that reflected who he actually wanted to be. He said something about a trip he hadn't taken. He laughed. The conversation moved on. But something stayed with him. On the walk home, the city felt strangely loud for midnight. He stopped in front of a shop window and looked at his reflection, backlit, slightly blurred, like someone standing behind frosted glass. When, he thought, did I become someone I don't recognize? And then more quietly, and what would it take to find my way back? He didn't know the answer. But for the first time in a long time, he was actually asking. What followed was not an immediate transformation. That is a lie that stories often tell, that a moment of recognition automatically becomes a moment of change. It doesn't. Not for most people. Not for Daniel. What followed was 3 weeks of sitting with the question. And the question was uncomfortable, because the honest answer was not, "I need a new job," or "I need to find a passion," or any of the things self-improvement culture tells you to pursue. The honest answer was something much harder. I have been avoiding myself. Not because he hated himself, but because something about being quiet, being still, being truly alone with his own thoughts had become unbearable. The scrolling, the noise, the lukewarm coffee in bed, the perpetual almost sleeping, all of it was cushioning, soft noise to fill the silence. But what was in the silence that was so frightening? Daniel sat with that question one night, and the answer that rose up surprised him. Disappointment. Not other people's disappointment in him, his own disappointment in himself. A grief he had never properly allowed himself to feel, for the choices not made, the courage not summoned, the version of himself he had always assumed was still coming someday.
What researchers who study human motivation have long understood is something that sounds deceptively simple. When people feel they have no agency over their own lives, when they stop believing their choices matter, they develop what can only be described as an inner silence, a withdrawal, not laziness, something closer to self-protection. Why try if trying doesn't seem to change anything? Daniel had been living in that silence for years, and the deepest wound of it was this: he had come to believe the silence was who he was, that the drifting was his character, that he was, at his core, someone who almost did things. He sat in his apartment on a Sunday night in September, and for the first time in a long time, he cried. Not with despair, with something more complicated than despair. Because crying meant he still cared, and caring, after so long of pretending not to, hurt in the way that only real things hurt. He picked up his phone and opened the Notes app. He typed 6 words. What if I started tomorrow morning? He stared at them for a long time. Then he set an alarm for 5 a.m. and went to sleep.
Day 1 was not inspiring. 5 a.m. in Daniel's apartment looked like this. Darkness. Cold floor. The alarm screaming with absolutely no regard for the gravity of the moment. His entire body arguing against consciousness. The very real possibility that this was a terrible idea. He got up anyway. He didn't do anything particularly meaningful that first morning. He made coffee. He sat at the window. He watched the sky go from black to a deep, uncertain gray. But something about that hour, that stolen hour before the world started making demands, felt different from any other time of day. It felt like the hour belonged to him. Not to his inbox, not to other people's expectations, not to the accumulated weight of all the ways he had fallen short. This hour, in the dark, before anyone else was awake, was his. He came back the next morning, and the next. By the end of the first week, something small but profound had shifted. Not in his circumstances, those were exactly the same, but in how he related to himself. Because every morning he woke up at 5 a.m., he was making a promise and keeping it. And that matters more than most people understand. There is something deeply powerful about being someone who does what they said they would do, not because the task itself is transformative, but because the act of keeping a promise to yourself, even a small one, even one no one else knows about, begins to rewrite the story you tell about who you are. Daniel had spent years telling himself he was someone who intended to change, who meant to start, who would do it eventually.
Every 5 a.m. alarm was a counter-argument. You are someone who starts. You are someone who shows up. You are someone who does the thing. He didn't say this out loud. He barely thought it consciously. But somewhere beneath language, beneath narrative, his body was learning a new truth about itself. And that truth, repeated quietly, daily, in the dark, was beginning to take root.
By week 3, Daniel had established a shape for his mornings. Not a rigid, optimized routine, just a quiet, human sequence that gave his first hour a sense of intention. He would wake up, make coffee slowly, not as a task, but as a ritual. Sit at his desk for 30 minutes with no phone, no screen. Sometimes he wrote in a notebook. Sometimes he just thought. Then he painted, or tried to. The half-finished canvas on his desk got worked on for 20 minutes each morning. It wasn't about producing anything. It was about returning, daily, to something that was only his. 3 things were quietly changing Daniel's life during this period, not as tricks or hacks, but as natural consequences of showing up consistently. The first was identity before action. Most people wait to feel motivated before they act. Daniel learned, slowly, through repetition, that it works the other way around. You act first, imperfectly, even reluctantly, and the feeling of being someone who acts follows. The philosophers call this virtue as habit. Aristotle wrote that we become courageous not by feeling brave, but by doing brave things, until bravery becomes who we are. Daniel was experiencing this not as philosophy, but as daily, ordinary life. The second was the recovery of silence. What had once been unbearable, being alone with his own thoughts, in the quiet, with nothing mediating the experience, became the thing he most looked forward to. The 5 a.m. hour taught him that the silence he had been fleeing was not the enemy. Inside the silence was the part of himself he had buried. His grief, yes, but also his curiosity, his ideas, his voice. The quieter he became in the mornings, the cleaner his thinking was during the day. The third was the compound effect of small promises. Around day 45, something shifted in how Daniel moved through his regular life. He started cooking instead of ordering food. He texted his mother back the same day. He went back to the gym, not with obsessive intensity, but consistently, twice a week. He pitched an idea at work that he had been holding privately for almost a year. None of these things were directly caused by waking up early, but they were caused by the person he was becoming, someone who had learned, one morning at a time, that his choices matter, that he is capable of deciding who he is. The 5 a.m. alarm was never really about the time. It was about the decision to be someone who chooses.
Day 21st came on a Saturday. Daniel didn't mark it with anything ceremonial. He woke up at 5 a.m., as he had every day for 21 days, made his coffee, sat by the window. Outside, it was snowing, softly, the kind of snow that lands without sound. He opened his notebook and read the first entry from day 1. The handwriting was uneven. The sentences were short and uncertain. They sounded like someone standing at the edge of something, not sure the ground would hold. He looked at that person for a long time. The painting on his desk was finished now. It wasn't perfect. There were places where the brushwork was hesitant, where he had painted over something, and you could see the ghost of the first attempt beneath. But it was finished, and it was genuinely his. He had reconnected with 2 old friends, not with dramatic honesty, but in the natural way that happens when you become easier to be around. When you stop performing exhaustion and start showing up. He was still at the same job, still in the same apartment. His life, from the outside, had not dramatically changed. But he had. The difference was subtle and total. The way the shift from winter to spring is subtle and total. You can't name the single moment it happened. But one morning you look up, and everything is different. Daniel no longer felt like a passenger. He felt for the first time in years like the person behind the wheel. Not perfectly in control, but present, awake, choosing. And that, it turned out, was everything.
Here is what I want to say directly to you before we close. This story was about 5 a.m., but it was never really about 5 a.m. It was about the decision to stop drifting and start choosing. And that decision, I want you to know, does not require an alarm clock. It doesn't require a perfect plan. It doesn't require the right moment or the right conditions, or the version of yourself that has already figured everything out. It requires only this, one small capped promise. The specific form doesn't matter. Waking early, returning to a practice, writing a single paragraph, taking a walk before the rest of your house wakes. What matters is that it is yours, that it is consistent, and that it is a daily act of choosing the person you want to become. Because here is the truth that Daniel's story quietly holds. You are not the sum of your intentions. You are the sum of what you actually do in the small, unglamorous daily moments when no one is watching, and the gap between who you are and who you want to be feels widest. Those are the moments that build the bridge. Those are the moments that matter. So let me ask you something, and I want you to sit with it, not scroll past it.
What is your 5 a.m.? What is the one thing, small, specific, yours, that you have been promising yourself you'll begin? Not someday, not when conditions improve, but tomorrow morning, in the quiet, before the world makes its demands. Whatever it is, I believe you're capable of it. And I think somewhere inside you, you believe it too.
You just listened to an entire story in American English. That's real. Give yourself a second to feel that. Now, let's work. We're going to break down 3 phrases from the story. For each one, first you'll hear it, then we'll talk about what makes it tricky, and then you'll say it the right way. Ready? Phrase number 1, the kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. Try it first. Say it out loud before I explain anything. Now, here's what most learners get wrong. They stress the word tired. But in natural American speech, the stress falls on fix. Listen, the kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. That final word carries the weight. It's where the emotion lands. Try again. The kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. That's it. That's the rhythm. Phrase number 2. Fine can be one of the most painful words in the English language. Go ahead. Say it once. Here's what's interesting about this sentence. The word fine, simple word. But here it's being used in an unexpected, almost ironic way. In American English, we do this a lot. We take a common word and flip its meaning through context. That's called subtext, meaning beneath the surface. The key to sounding natural here is the pause. Fine can be one of the most painful words. That tiny beat before can signal that something surprising is coming. It's a speaker's trick. Use it. Try it with the pause. Fine can be one of the most painful words in the English language. Yes, that's the version that makes people stop and listen. Phrase number 3. He felt like a passenger in his own life. This one's a metaphor, a comparison that creates a picture in your mind. Passenger means someone who's just along for the ride, not driving. Not deciding, just there. Say it. He felt like a passenger in his own life. One more time, with intention, he felt like a passenger in his own life. 3 phrases. And you didn't just memorize them, you understood why they work. Here's your reflection for today. Daniel's story wasn't about waking up at 5 a.m. It was about deciding one small daily decision to stop drifting and start choosing. You're doing the same thing right now. Every time you choose to learn instead of scroll, to listen instead of skip, you're making that decision. You're already someone who shows up. From today on, you're someone who learns English through stories that mean something, not just someone who wants to improve, someone who actually does. Now, here's what I want you to do. Go back to the story in your mind. Find one phrase that stayed with you. Just one. The one you're still thinking about. Put it in the comments. Write it in English. That one comment is your 5 a.m., your small kept promise. And if this video gave you something real today, like it, share it, and subscribe. There are more stories like this one coming. Stories that will train your ear and remind you of what you're capable of. See you next class.